His phone said 3:47 a.m. He was sitting in his car in the parking lot of a 4-hour gas station in Minneapolis, hands shaking on the steering wheel, staring at the neon sign through the windshield. He could see them in there. The beer coolers, the bottles lined up like they were waiting for him specifically. He'd been sober for 73 days. He could feel it slipping, could feel the weight of everything, the job he'd lost, the apartment he couldn't afford anymore, the way his sister wouldn't let him see his nephew, the specific loneliness of being 36 years old and starting over from nothing, pressing down on him so hard he couldn't breathe normally. He opened the car door, then he closed it, then he sat there for 40 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, having a conversation with himself that nobody would ever know about, at 3:47 inches the morning, in a parking lot in Minneapolis. And if you want to know what happened next, what happened to a man who had everything taken from him and had to decide, right there in that car, whether broken meant finished, stay till the end. Once upon a time, there was a man named Nathan Cross, 36 years old. He lived in a studio apartment on Lake Street that cost $850 a month and had a single window that looked out at a brick wall and a parking lot. He worked at a warehouse in St. Paul, loading trucks from 5 a.m. to 2 p.m., making $34,000 a year, and trying not to think about the fact that he used to make 3 times that. He'd lost the good job in 2019, lost the house in 2020, lost the marriage in 2021. But the thing that had taken the longest to lose, the thing that took every year until 2023, was the ability to pretend he wasn't dying. He'd been drinking since his 30s, not all at once, just gradually, the way you stop noticing your own slow decline. A beer after work became 2 beers. 2 became a bottle became a bottle and a half, and then more. He'd hidden it from his wife until he couldn't hide it anymore. She'd asked him to get help. He'd promised he would. He didn't. She left. He drank more. His job fired him because he showed up still drunk 3 times in 1 week. He moved into progressively smaller spaces and drank in all of them. By the time he hit bottom was a hospital room where they told him his liver was scarred, and if he kept going, he had maybe 5 years. He was 35 years old, and a doctor was telling him he was killing himself. He came out of the hospital and did what people do when they're terrified. He quit drinking. Not gradually, completely. The same day. He checked into a recovery program that took his last $4,000 in savings. He attended meetings. He had a sponsor. He read the literature. He did everything the way you're supposed to do it. And it was the hardest thing he'd ever done. Not drinking part. That part was hard, sure. The sweating at night, the cravings that came in waves that made him want to crawl out of his own skin. The specific anxiety of existing without the thing that had been numbing him for 5 years. But the hardest part was facing the person he'd become. He'd been a decent person once. He'd had a wife named Sarah who laughed easily. He'd had a job where he was respected. He'd had a brother and a sister who didn't look at him like he was a stranger they'd agreed to tolerate. All of that was gone because of the choices he'd made. And every single day of sobriety meant waking up and remembering that. Meant sitting in those meetings and hearing other people talk about their kids and realizing he didn't have anyone who wanted him to be their dad. Meant going to see his sister and her husband, watching him like he was going to disappear into the bathroom and come back high. He could feel people waiting for him to fail. And the weight of that, the weight of knowing that most people in his life had already decided he was permanently broken, was sometimes harder than the not drinking part. 3 weeks in, he applied for the warehouse job. It was humiliating. The interview was with a guy 10 years younger, who'd probably heard about him through the grapevine, small city. Word gets around. Nathan had a nice house once. Nathan had a good job. Nathan had a wife. Nathan had drank it all away. The guy hired him anyway. Didn't say anything about it. Just said the shift was 5 a.m. and don't be late. Nathan was never late. He showed up at 4:45 on his first day, worked harder than everyone around him, didn't talk much, ate his lunch alone, went home and went to meetings and went to bed. The weeks stacked. His sponsor, a man named Richard who was 62 and had been sober for 23 years, told him something that landed different. "You think you need to earn forgiveness?" Richard said. "From your family, from God, from yourself. But that's not how this works. You don't earn it. You just get to live different. That's the forgiveness." Nathan had nodded and not believed it, but he kept showing up. To work, to meetings, to his sister's house once a month, when she finally agreed to let him take his nephew to the park. His nephew was 7 and didn't remember much about the before times when Nathan had been different. They went to the playground. Nathan pushed him on the swing. His nephew laughed, and Nathan felt something shift, very slightly, underneath everything. It wasn't forgiveness. It was just the possibility that he could exist in someone's life and not immediately ruin it. Day 70 came and went. He marked it on a calendar in his apartment, just a small X on the date. He'd been doing it every day since he left the hospital. Some days the marking off was the only proof that time was actually moving forward. That night he almost quit. Not the sobriety, the everything, the trying, the getting out of bed, the going to a job that paid almost nothing, the sitting in meetings with people who'd also destroyed their lives and then rebuilt them. The possibility that Richard was right, and he could actually get to live different. He sat on his bed and thought about how easy it would be to not do this anymore. How easy it would be to just stop, to lie down and give in to the weight of it. He called Richard instead. They talked for an hour. Richard mostly listened. Nathan mostly cried. At the end of it, Richard said something simple. "You showed up today. You didn't drink today. You showed up here. That's everything. Everything else is just the next day." Nathan hung up and went to bed. The next morning, he went to work. Day 73 was a Tuesday. He woke up at 4:15, made coffee, drove to work, loaded trucks until 2 p.m., went to a meeting at 6, came home, sat at his kitchen table, and did what he'd been doing for 73 days. He existed. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would make a good story. Just he showed up inside his own life, even though every part of him wanted to disappear. Around 11 p.m., he felt it start. The pull. Not toward drinking exactly, he was past that most days, but toward something. The feeling of being fundamentally alone, of being fundamentally broken, of being someone who tried so hard to destroy himself that the damage might be permanent. He sat with it for a while, didn't run from it, didn't call anyone, just sat with the weight of it. And then, at 3:47 a.m., he got in his car. He sat in that parking lot for 40 minutes, not moving, not crying, not even thinking in words exactly, just existing in the specific despair of someone who understands exactly how broken he is and has to decide if broken is the end of the story. At 4:27 a.m., he turned the car on. He didn't drive to the gas station. He drove to the 2 4-hour diner 3 blocks away, ordered coffee and eggs, sat in a booth under fluorescent lights, watched other people live their lives, a couple coming in from a late night, a group of night shift workers taking a break, an older man reading a newspaper. He realized something while sitting there. He wasn't fine. He wasn't healed. He wasn't the person he'd been before, and he never would be. Something in him was permanently altered by what he'd done, what he'd lost, what he'd destroyed. But he was here. He was 73 days sober in a diner at 4:30 the morning, and he was alive, and he had a job, and he had a sponsor, and he had a nephew who'd laughed when he pushed him on the swing. Broken didn't mean finished. Broken just meant he had to keep going, had to show up, had to exist even when existing hurt. He finished the coffee, paid the check, drove home. He got to bed at 5:15, woke up at 4:15, made coffee, went to work. He's 73 days sober right now, not because it's easy, not because he's fixed, but because he decided in a parking lot at 3:47 inches the morning that broken was not the same as finished. 6 months later, he'll be sober 250 days. A year later, over 400. He'll take his nephew to school once a week, and his sister will stop watching him like he's about to disappear. He'll get a different job that pays a little more. He'll go back to college, slowly, taking night classes. He'll never have the house back or the marriage back or the years back, but he'll have a life. And he'll build it the only way he knows how, by showing up the next day, and the next day, and the next day. Not because he's strong. He's not. He's the weakest person in his recovery meetings most nights. But he keeps coming back, and that, it turns out, is the only form of strength that actually matters. If you're watching this and you're at a point where broken feels like finished, it's not. It never is. The person who keeps showing up even when they're broken, especially when they're broken, that's the person who gets to rebuild. If you needed to hear that today, I hope it landed. Subscribe, because every story here is about someone who had to figure out what it actually takes to keep going. And watch my last video, because sometimes you need both: the understanding of what you're building toward and the resilience to keep building even when you don't know if you'll get there.